So I'm starting now. Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to the first episode of a Let's Talk series, an event organized by the Finance and Investment Cell of the Department of Professional Studies, Christ University. So, for the first episode, we have Gautam, who's an alumnus of Christ University and the Department of Professional Studies. He worked at Goldman Sachs as an analyst. He finished his BBA in Finance and Accountancy in year 2019. The purpose of today's conversation is getting to know the entire process through which Gautam went before and after reaching Goldman Sachs. So, first of all, we would like to thank Gautam for his valuable time today. And yeah, let's have a fun conversation.
Okay, Gautam.
Thank you.
Sorry, you can continue.
No, I was just saying thank you so much for that kind introduction. That's very sweet of you. Go ahead, Preksha.
Yeah, so Gautam, the most obvious and the basic question, how was your day at Goldman Sachs like? And could you elaborate more on your role as an analyst there?
Yeah, for sure. I broke off for a second over there, but I'm guessing you asked me what my day-to-day was at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, that's right.
My day-to-day at Goldman Sachs, I hate trying to define it because it's impossible. I try to look back on my last 2 years at GS, and when I, even now try to see what my day-to-day was, there really wasn't anything. As a matter of fact, the only constant throughout these 2 years was I could choose what my day to day would look like, right? So every day I could kind of choose what that would look like. So it started off with a very simple reporting role that quickly evolved into too many different things for me. So I started to learn how to code and I started to learn how to build business intelligence tools. I was talking to many senior people from across the globe. And by the end of the 2 years, the role was almost unrecognizable from what I started off with. But if I had to maybe, pinpoint some key underliers that, were constant throughout, I'd say every day would at least have maybe 2 to 3 hours of talking to people, and maybe another 2, 3 hours in learning, which is over and above what you do on your day, what your my day-to-day role, right? So when after having finished my day-to-day role, I try to learn on how to improve that, how to make that better, and then 2 to 3 hours on talking to people on what they think of how this can be better, right? So I don't think there's any constant throughout. I'm sorry for the vague answer, but that's what it is. Every day was very, very different, and you kind of just chose what you wanted to do that day, and that's what your day will look like.
Genuinely, that seems really interesting. The amount of exposure you got, like the way you describe, it gets me excited too. So, I would like to know more about like the work culture at Goldman Sachs, and genuinely for us students, it's like it seems really hectic that you're on calls all day and all the time. So, was it really like that, or was it manageable? You can work at your pace like that.
So if you talk about my work experience, I know GS has a very infamous work culture tag to it. If you talk about my experience, I had a fantastic boss. I had a fantastic team who would always be there to support me. The work hours were not unmanageable if you made it that way, right? So it was extremely manageable. And then, but the reason it becomes hectic, as you'd like to call it, is because all of us at GS are always very excited, right? And when you're that excited about something, you're always thinking about how to make it better. So while your work is limited to maybe 4, 5, 6 hours a day, tops, right? You're always trying to best yourself and try to make it better than what you did before, right? The day before that. And that's where you spend those extra hours. So again, from a culture point of view, especially for the Bangalore office, considering that it's one of the newer offices of Goldman, there was a huge focus on trying to make it the best place to work, right? And this obviously fell under it, right? But on if you're trying to see if it's too hectic and stuff like that, it's again very dependent upon how you treat the job, right? So you can either choose just to do the work you want, or you can choose to go over and above. And depending on what you choose and how you choose to do your job, your work hours are going to be different, right? But specifically to the Bangalore office, the work culture is extremely pleasant, and they've done everything in their power to make it so.
That's like wonderful, to me. I always thought that it'd be like super hectic, but like after listening to you, it's like, okay, it's actually manageable. But moving forward, how is like the COVID impact on your work? Like, how did it impact the daily working in Goldman Sachs?
Oh, for sure. That was a little rough in the middle. I think so, as I said, the Bangalore office and GS overall is kind of designed, or any corporate is designed to provide the best experience to its employees, right? COVID was something nobody really expected, and so the systems kind of broke down over there, right? Uh, where we all moved to home and everything was fine, and everyone was focused so much on the tech side, trying to make sure your laptops were connected to the internet and stuff like that, that we forgot to even turn our laptops off, right? So it's only like very late in maybe like October, November last year that we kind of realized that, hey, when you went home from office, you kind of went home, right? And that was it. But because you were at home all the time, I'm sure you guys have the same problem, right? You're always online, which started becoming a problem, right? And on a more individual level, you start realizing that there's a problem there. And sure enough, with every change, it corrected itself. And you kind of started realizing that, okay, you need to have those boundaries. So over a while, it did correct itself. As a matter of fact, even at a firm level, Goldman, I think only recently, this month itself provided a mental health leave, right? Where you could take a leave whenever you wanted in the next 2 to 3 months if you have like a mental health like thing, right? You can just say, hey, listen, I want to take it off. And so, I think at an individual level and at a firm level, people started realizing that, hey, something needs to be done about this. But before that realization kicked in, it was a little tough. Yeah.
All right. So, Mehul,
That's
would you
like,
like?
yeah, that's like a deep insight. Uh, Gautam, let's like jump back to the time when you were like an undergraduate and in a scenario like us, wherein it was like tough to decide whether to go for a placement or actually go for a postgraduate career and actually enhance your technical skills. So for you, was it like hard to decide upon the path, or you were crystal clear from the beginning? No, no, I want to go for the placement and not for the postgraduate.
In many ways, I think it's a very interesting question because in many ways, this is one of the decisions that were kind of taken for me instead of me having taken them. So unlike all the other things that happen in my life, like the GS internship, I got it right after my second year, right? Which is much sooner than generally we start thinking about postgraduate programs or whatever. So I was kind of focused on the internship then, and before I knew it, I got the pre-placement offer. And so for me, it was a very simple progression from, okay, there's a very clear path on what needs to be done next, right? But if I had to think back and see whether I would have chosen a postgraduate program before having any work ex, the answer would still probably be no, that I'd want to have worked for a couple of years, mostly because I wouldn't have known at that point in time what I want to, master in. Only once like I've worked for a while do I actually understand the basics of the field even, right? And I understand, what I truly want to do. And I feel like without that, just jumping into a master's for me would be a little too big a leap of faith, right? So I definitely, even if this path wasn't chalked out for me, I would have wanted to work for at least a couple of years before I jump into a master's program.
Yeah, that solves the majority of the questions for all of us, maybe. So, what is the screening process at GS like? So, how many tests and interviews did you like actually go through before actually being offered the position? Like, could you just brief us about the entire process?
So, for everyone's awareness, the way I entered GS was through the campus internship, right? there's two ways. You can either go through the internship and get that pre-placement offer, or you can, after having graduated college, apply as a lateral hire, right? Where you apply directly for a full-time role. There's no internship in the middle of that, right? And so for the internship process, the hiring process is a little different, where you first give an aptitude test, as I'm sure a lot of you second years and third years are already aware, and then you kind of move on to giving anywhere from 2 to 5 rounds of interviews, right? But it's a little lighter generally on the internship side, because for the internship, the actual selection process isn't the interviews or the aptitude itself, right? The actual selection process is the internship, right? So for if you're coming in as an intern, the internship isn't your end goal, right? Your end goal is wanting to get that PPO. And in that sense, your selection process kind of becomes that 2 months of work, which in a much more real sense is much more rigorous than having to go through, as I've heard, is anywhere between 15 to 27 rounds of interviews before, if you join in as a graduate hire, right? If you don't go through the internship, there's a lot of rounds of interviews, but still the internship one is a little more rigorous because you have to work for 2 months to make, and every day needs to be perfect for you to be able to get that PPO. So that's the two kind of hiring processes that you have.
Okay, that is something that a lot of us didn't actually know about. So like going down, like if someone actually goes from the path you went or goes for a direct placement in that case. So like any resources that you could suggest for aptitude, a person like me who's a non-math student or who has a very little interest in math. So how does he actually sharpen up his aptitude skills?
So I think the aptitude test is kind of shrouded in mystery that way, because a lot of us haven't. This will be the first time for us having given it, and so as non-math students, sometimes it might be like, oh my God, I might not know this, but I think uh, from what I understand about the aptitude test, the reason isn't to test. The reason that test exists isn't to test your math, right? They're not going to be asking you what the diameter of a circle is, or how to calculate the area of a square and things like that. The purpose behind it is to actually understand who you are as a person, right? At a much like deeper level, if you had to go that philosophical, it's to understand who you are as a person and whether you have the skills to kind of work in that environment, right? So instead of focusing on maths, I think if you wanted to prep for it, right, you try to move more towards prepping for things like logical reasoning, and finding patterns. And generally, these are like, so I don't even know if there is a preparation for it, because the purpose of the aptitude test isn't to kind of filter people out, but mostly to classify people into what they'd be best at, right? So when I gave the aptitude test, the aptitude test finally said, okay, he'll be a good fit in the global markets division, right? And looking back, the reason I guess is because I'm really good with data, really good with finding patterns. And that's what the test was about, right? The test was, okay, can you tell me what the next pattern would be, or the next thing in the pattern would be, and stuff like that, right? So it's not really math specific, and not having math in your course is not going to be a handicap. And it's just to test where you'd be a best fit, right? So if suppose your pattern finding isn't that great, but it turns out your communication is really, really good, right? You might get into another division called the HCM, right? So it's really just it's not a filtration process. It's just a classification process where they try to see, okay, this is the minimum we need. Okay, so if you cross that minimum you need, where would be the best fit, right? And then you'd see, okay, then you have the interview process, which then acts like a filtration process.
Nice. So Gautam, in the process, like you just told that there are 2 to 5 interviews. So even if a person who goes through a normal placement offer, he might need to through a lot of interview rounds. So like any sort of resource that you picked up, and also like there might be some situations in any interview that you might be stuck into, like where you didn't get the answer in the spontaneity, or you didn't get the answer to it at that moment. So what did you do? Did you actually bluff around or anything of that sort? What did you do?
I think The key to any interview is that to understand that you're telling a story, right? Most people try to study the technicals. They try to, they try to prepare for, they look up things like, okay, what HCM question or HR questions are generally asked, frequently asked HR questions. And in that kind of, which is a very important step, but in that kind of, chaos, we always, sometimes we forget that, an interview is just about telling a story, right? And the story is the story of you, right? And what you're trying to tell them is, okay, this is who I am, and this is why I'm the best fit for what you're looking for, right? So you kind of have to look at it from two angles, that this is who I am and this is what you're looking for, right? And so in that sense, if you look at like the question you asked me, that if you don't know an answer, would you bluff around? If you look at it from this perspective, it's a very simple no, I wouldn't bluff around, right? Because what you want to show them is that you're above everything, above knowing everything, right? You're an honest person who can be trained, right? And if you put that person forth, which most of us already are, right? But in these answering questions, we kind of get lost in that space, right? But if you kind of consider that as a story of who I am, the answer becomes very clear. Where no, I wouldn't. I would. And what do I have to prepare for an interview? I have to know everything that I am, right? So, a lot of you are going to be doing extra courses like ACCA, CFA, which are extremely important for this thing, and it's really good that you guys are doing it. It helped me a lot. It helped me out a lot, right? So you kind of, instead of knowing, okay, here's I did a ACCA, right? So here's the basic accountancy I need to know, right? Instead of that, it's a story of me. So why did I choose ACCA, right? That becomes more important, right? And that's what you have to show, which in turn will kind of reflect on, okay, it'll kind of show that, okay, you are strong in account and that's why you chose it or whatever reason it was, right? But that'll, I think, bring more flavor into just focusing on answering the questions correctly, right? You want to be putting you forward and telling that story of you in the best possible way.
Okay, that's an angle that I never looked through. It's a prism that I've never looked through. Okay, so Gautam, another important aspect in the whole hiring thing. So, like coming to the resume application. So, what did you do, and what are the tips that anyone could actually follow going into an organization as the scale of Goldman Sachs?
Again, with the same, I just echo the same thing that you do in an interview, right? A resume isn't a list of things that you've done in your life, okay? Instead, it's a story that you want to tell, right? It's a less a personal story because it's still in writ format, right? And so, okay, like you'll have to, but you basically still want to see what the company wants to see and what am I, right? More importantly, what am I and how do I best fit those requirements, right? And your resume is basically going to be a layout of, okay, these are the things that say, okay, I best fit those requirements, right? But again, it's always first yourself and then, okay, the company's needs, and then you match those two things, right? And so if you think you scored like really, really well in college, right? If your marks are through the roof, you're going to probably want to put that up on top, right? But for example, I wasn't the greatest scorer in college, right? I barely passed with the first class, right? And so that was kind of lower on my resume, right? I put the other things on top, right? So again, it's a story that you want to tell about yourself, and it's really just how you want it to come across as, okay, I'm the best fit for you and you're going to want to take me for these reasons, right? And your resume is basically just a piece of paper that says these are the reasons why.
So, Gautam, just to add on, like after the entire selection process is gone through, like what is the next step that you guys go through at GS? Like okay, you have been offered the placement. What's the next training or some sort of process that is happening after the whole selection process? And how long does it go for?
Do you mean after we've gotten the internship or after the internship is completed and you start working there full time?
Yeah, once you start working over there, like the fresh comer basically, like how is it a day for a fresh comer who's totally new to the GS setup? Internship, maybe you know here and there bits and bits of like how the things work. Like suppose I'm new to it and I don't know anything about the work culture or the work.
So I think, and I think this is common across or maybe all major companies, right? Where because we're fresh out of college, the first thing that they do, like the absolute first thing, is they teach you the small things that we call the corporate ways, right? So there's a couple of things that you do differently in the corporate world, right? And the absolute first thing would be to teach you how to do those things. Luckily, as Christites and as professionals, we already know those things through our extracurricular activities, through like festing, all those how to be professional. Like all of us have shown up in blazers today, right? Those kind of things, those kind of small things, Christ already helps us with, and so we're already very well accustomed to the corporate world, right? But your first few 3 4 weeks are just going to go in training you about the job itself, but more importantly, the focus will be on training you how to be an employee, right? Which is a first for every one of us, and so that's how your first few weeks are going to go.
So since like the first few weeks are all about like basic skill development and things like that. So would you recommend like any skill at this point that we could work on a daily basis that it will help us like at that time when we are actually sitting for such big interviews?
For sure. Again, this skill will differ from for different people, right? So what you're gonna want. So what I did was I looked at myself. I saw what I was good at, right? And I saw what things I was good at worked for the companies, right? So I was very good with data. I was very good with logical thinking, right? So I went ahead and developed those skills. So I learned how to program a little bit, some basic data. We call them ETL tools. I started getting certified in these things, and those kind of really helped me showcase who I am, right? Already I was very good at communication, which like I had a lot of co-curriculars to like support that, right? So again, the skill that you want to showcase or you want to see, okay, this is what sets me apart, will be different for everyone because each person is their own individual, right? So you're instead of trying to fit a circle in a square hole, what you're going to want to try to do is say that, okay, this is who I am, right? And these are the qualities that make me different from everyone else, right? And out of those qualities, choose the ones that may be best suited to the company and develop those fully, right? Instead, if like communications isn't your strong point, don't try to like don't try obviously try to develop that in the long run, right? But what you don't want to give up is suppose you're good at maybe like programming or even like art or something, right? Which could be the farthest thing. You want to kind of mold that or present that in a way that is that kind of fits the corporate, right? So, for example, a lot of y'all I know are very good at social media, right? And you started your own finance pages. You wouldn't have thought social media is something that would be required in the finance field, but you guys found a way to merge the two, right? So you're going to want to take what you're already good at and push that to the extreme so that okay, that gives you a good chance of getting in there.
Okay, yeah, that clears like a big air around it, because every one of us is just in the, race of getting more and more skills. But, you're telling that, work on things you're actually good at and you could get a placement with it makes a lot more sense now, like that you've explained. And now, since like you talked about, how Christ had a lot of co-curriculars and, it obviously helped you communication skills. So, did you like actually participate in festing and other different kinds of clubs back at Christ? And more importantly, was it just like an add-on or did it help you develop yourself at totally another level?
Oh, dude, without a doubt, it helped me. I can't tell you when I was in the 12th grade, I couldn't talk to another human being, right? And somehow through Insight was my first interaction with co-curricular activities, right? We got kind of pushed into these, okay, you have to talk and you have to talk to a room full of people, right? And just that first, and it happened in the first like week or whatever, right? From informal orientation to insight to team professionals, which I took part in street play in, all of these things kind of broke down that shy kid who couldn't talk to another human, who will then go on to be able to address like 100, 200, 3,000 people if someday you talk in the main audience, right? And that is so important because there's not a lot of places where you can get that kind of opportunity, right? And for to be in a place where each person gets that opportunity and each person is actually forced to break down any barriers they have and just be completely their open self, right? It's a very important thing, which I feel like Christ does a brilliant job at. I didn't realize it when I was there, but co-curriculars, I try to take every one of them, right? I was in festing. I was a part of the street play team. We informal orientation. Ours was much better than anyone else's, and we tried to do everything that we possibly could, right? Like I'm not even a musician, but I've performed in a cappella teams twice, right? We did everything that we possibly could, even if we were really, really bad at it, right? And that kind of and only because we got that opportunity to do it at Christ is why and is why I am what I am today, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. I only realized after I'm graduated that I'm grateful, but I am. And it's really just a fantastic place to be, and it's not something that is just something that I write on my resume. Because, as I said, maybe the resume will get you through the door, right? If you put fasting on it, maybe it'll get you through the door, right? But if you're not able to communicate in that interview, right, saying it's very clear that image of a fester or a person who can speak very well kind of just starts dissipating very fast, right? And so it really isn't about just writing that thing on your resume. It's about actually developing those skills, right? And these extracurriculars, co-curriculars are very, very useful. Just take those opportunities, even if you haven't, like it's never too late. Just use these opportunities to kind of get over your, oh, I can't do it. And it's just a great place to, even if you want, go ahead and fail because Christ is always there to support you, right? Just I auditioned for 2 dance teams. I can't even move my legs, right? And so Christ said, it's okay, man, just do it. If you fail, it's fine. Just do whatever you want, right? And just having that was very, very nice because uh, yeah, I'd recommend trying everything out for sure.
Yes, like after listening to you, like at least for me, if I ever say that extracurricular, I am not going to neglect my professional course. I'm not going to do that because that's going to help me in the long run, as you said. And all the fun meets is
For
something that you
sure.
cherish a lot. Like I can see, it's like already
There's
one
no
year.
lie then.
Yeah, you say something. I'm happy to cut you there.
I completely concur. Like I agree completely. What you're saying is absolutely right. Go for it. Do everything you can. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a brilliant place to be. It's a brilliant time to be there. Just do everything you can. I see you guys, even though you're stuck in a pandemic, are making the best of it with things like these. For sure, it's gonna be worth your time. Do it.
Yeah, exactly. So since one year's already gone in the online, so once college starts, grab every opportunity we get it in our way.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah, now I'll get into a little philosophical side of it. Like if you like go back and then if I ask you what would you change in the past, what would it be? Or you would be like, no, I'm happy with what I did. Nothing I'd change.
I'm so happy to say that I wouldn't change a single thing in my past. Although, if I had to, if I had to change one thing, I tell myself to score better marks. I know it sounds really stupid, but I look back at I can never write my marks in my resume, right? And so, like, if I just had to change one thing, right, I just look at myself 2 days before the exam and just be like, dude, can you study like once? And like just stop, like just attend class. Like that, it's as simple as that, right? Listen to your teachers. Like they're telling you something, just listen to it, right? And like at the time it seems so stupid, but if I literally had to go back and change, I'm so happy with everything that's happened, right? But if one thing, if it was like one thing, right, it'd just be like do more college in college. That's it. That would be my entire thing I wanted to change.
Right, right. So like that's like you are like amount like around zero regrets. So that's something like which we all would aspire to do like in the future, like be like Gautam, to not have any damn regrets
Oh,
later.
please, you can be so much better than Gotham. Don't aspire to be me. You can do so much better. But for sure, it's not a bad place to be. Like, I think I'm very happy
Right,
with the last 5 years.
right. So like since you talked about the last 5 years, like let's get into the next 5 years. So what are your, views on the job markets in the like next 5 years? And what would be like a determining factor for anyone to get into such big firms in the next 5 years?
Oh, to get into a big firm in the next 5 years, what's the job market look like? These are questions I haven't asked myself. um, what would the job? I have no. I don't think anybody honestly has an idea of what the job market will look like in 5 years. It's changing so fast, right? But I think if there's one constant that's been like throughout since jobs were ever there is that, very simply put, the best person gets the job, right? And so you're gonna want to look like you're gonna want to look at what the space looks like around you, and you're gonna want to adapt yourself to be that best person for that role, right? So if you're looking to, okay, I want to be this, right? Look at what the job market at that current point says this is, right? And again, that changes very frequently, right? Like maybe 5, 10 years ago, a finance role, you had to be very good at finance, right? But now you have to be good at finance. You have to be good at communicating that finance to people who don't understand it, and other skills like I had to be very good at programming at my. I didn't have to, but it was a huge plus that I was good at programming in my job, and that some very small processes here and there I could just like automate. And by the end of it, when I look back now, I automated like 2/3 of my job, right? And that was like a huge plus to have. So it's really not about trying to predict what the job market will be in 5 years, but try to look at what role you want and what skills will kind of help you with that. And completely like throughout, since jobs have ever existed, it's always just been the best person suited for the job will always get that job, right? And so you're gonna want to develop yourself to make sure you're the best person for that job, and that's kind of it. And that's never going to change.
Right. So you actually talked about, how as a finance person, these days it's always a benefit to have like few add-ons which will help you get automated and, better with the whole tech world, right? So, due to the pandemic, what
Mhm.
according to you would be a change in the filtration process, to get into such big firms, like if any, what do you think?
I think the big firms have done a very good job in keeping the filtration process or the interview process very similar to what it was before. It wasn't an easy task to do, but they've done a very good job in retaining the essence of it. The reason I know this is because my brother recently just went through one such process, and he went through it during the pandemic, right? And when I compare mine to his, I see that it was really almost the same, and I couldn't have imagined it to have been so, right? They had a very good process set up in the start. I think they've just done a very good job translating it into into an online kind of thing, right? Which I wouldn't have imagined was possible because that personal face to face is really what's most important. But as I'm sure you all have experienced with your classes, once you transition from that thing that you never thought would have been possible, and you move into that online thing, and you're here now, you see that, okay, like there was a lot of effort put into this, and it is really bearing fruit. So there isn't really much change, I have to say, in the interview aptitude process as such. Again, I'm not in hiring, so I wouldn't know the nitty-gritties of the system, but all I can see from my perspective is that they've done an absolutely fantastic job in changing that so that they can accommodate the pandemic itself.
Right, like you said, how everything has adapted totally in this like 1 year is something which is beyond all of our expectations. Be it college, be it the job environment, there was crazy transformations. And now talking about like how about your future plan? Like, what do you plan for the future? And is the pandemic the reason for any change, like if any, on a whole basis, like a macro basis?
Uh, the pandemic genuinely brought in some changes, right, in your day-to-day working. But on a macro level, on a big picture view, I try to keep it the same. For me, my end goal is to kind of just make sure I'm learning something new every day, right? And when I see myself at 30 years old, I just want to have learned everything. right? I know it's not possible, but I want to have tried at least to have learned everything, right? And the pandemic did kind of like uh, kind of bring that to a halt for a while. But then you kind of started realizing that because of the pandemic, you started learning even newer things which you wouldn't have otherwise. So the pandemic, while initially it did look like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever, it did have its silver lining, right? Next 5 years, just keep focusing on that big picture, right? Want to make sure you learn as much, right? As many of you as the organizers at least know, I just quit my job a week ago, right? And the reason being, I wanted to learn newer things. That I've spent 2 very good years at Goldman, and I've learned so much there, right? And now I want to move into a different phase of learning and use what I have learned over there in newer fields, right? Um, so that's what my goal is going to be for the next 5 years. It's just to learn as much as I can. And at the end of the day, that learning is going to take you somewhere. I don't know where that is yet. Hopefully it'll become clear soon. Uh, but till I'm in this 20s crisis, just keep making the best out of it and learning as much as you can.
Gautam, like there's this whole culture of like learning, self-learning that goes on in the phase which we are in. So like any like tips or any resources that actually you went through, like apart from the festing, apart from the books, apart from the course, like some sort of YouTube channel or something that you went through and got your basics of finances right. Like anything that you would recommend.
Oh, attend Rohit sir's class for sure. Rohit sir was my third year professor for finance. He's absolutely fantastic. I see Matthew Verghese sir is here also. Please, if any IF students are here and if he still teaches IF, definitely keep attending that class. It's fantastic. Apart from those resources, if you wanted to look at a more self-learning perspective, again, I wouldn't focus on finance. Hey, sorry, am I breaking off?
No, you're good. You're good now. You're good now.
No. Cool. If you were to, if again, I wouldn't focus on just finance. Again, your focus for self-learning especially should be to push who you are, right? Identify who you are and just try to be your true self. Don't try to fit yourself into what, GS or any other company is expecting of you, because they're not, right? They just want the best candidate, right? And the only way you can be the best candidate is to be your best self, right? So identify what are the best things about you and try to push that to the absolute extreme, right? Be that best person in that field, right? And then when you kind of do that, you realize that, okay, fine. And so the best resource, if you were asking me, could be, I don't know if you all have heard of these sites called edX, which is Harvard and another top university sponsored like free learning website, right? So just go to these websites, everything's online. The benefit of having the pandemic is that everything went online, right? So things that weren't previously online are now, right? So a quick Google search on, I want to learn how to do this, will give you like 10 blogs telling you how you want to do this by the most experienced people in those fields, right? So just I think the key would be to identify what you want to do and literally just then Google it.
Guys, I didn't know about edX before this. Thank you for giving us an insight and like thank you for making us more curious for Rogan's classes. I personally didn't know that it was this interesting. I would definitely at least get to know through my sources, even if I don't attend it uh, physically. But ending on a lighter note, Gautam, right? We know that this year the viewership at OTT platforms has been high. So any movie show recommendation or any books that you read that could anything that you that helped you sail through the lockdown and the tough times.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
dude, for sure, anything with Paresh Rawal in it, without a doubt. Dude, anything with Paresh Rawal in it, just have to watch. My all-time favorite movie is Dedanadhan. Watch it. If you guys want to hit me up on Insta talking about Dedanadhan, I'm happy to do that. Hey, do you have any recommendations for me?
Yeah, yeah. any kind of massy movies. Like same, I have like Rajpal Yadav and Paresh Rawal and people like that.
Yes, yes. Oh, absolutely, for sure. Dude, hit me up on IG. Let's talk about this later for sure.
Sure, sure, sure.
Yeah, dude. This is absolute quality content for sure.
For the next 5 minutes, just can we ask the audience also to give some suggestions? Also, at the same time, ask some questions if they have on to Gautam. There are a couple of
Yeah, yeah. Hit
questions.
me. Let's hear it.
Specifically, one actually DM, but you can put it out in the chat, guys. But one question was again, this specifically mentioning on the technical skills. So any technical skill you would recommend, like because you mentioned coding, how could they go about it? You did tell edX, but any other resources as such?
Okay, again, what technical skills will depend on person to person. If you're talking about me, I learned how to program. How I learned how to program is I bought this book off of Amazon called VBA for Dummies and SQL for Dummies, right? Or SQL. I don't know how to pronounce it because I just read it. Right, so I started learning these the most basic data. I was very good at data, so I wanted to learn how to program using structured data sets. So I just literally look for the thing that you want and type for dummies in after that, and it should some book should pop up, right? And so that's how I started that's how I started my programming journey. How I got good at finance is genuinely because of Rohit sir. His classes were extremely insightful, and they kind of made me very curious about that. And so my research paper in my final year was also in line with what he taught as well. And then that kind of just tumbled down into me Googling, reading things up, right? So again, if you want technical knowledge on how to program, there's too many sites on the page, too many courses. I on Coursera, there's this one. If you want to learn how to do Python, it's just called Python for Everyone, right? I think it's by a professor in MIT who teaches that course. So I definitely recommend that course, right? But again, right, if you want to learn a new skill set, just Google what the skill set you want, and there's going to be people who are much more experienced than me writing blogs about what's the best way to go about it, right? And there's no better place to learn from them, right?
I have a couple of questions, but Ritvik is asking what vertical did you work in? Was it a global market division?
Yeah, I worked in the global markets division at Goldman Sachs, and to put that in non-finance terms or very simple terms, what that meant is we were in the trading division of Goldman Sachs, right? So we were the division that traded with securities from all over the world. So that was what we were doing. The vertical, its official name is, it used to be securities division. Now it's called the global markets division.
Okay. The one more question, and I mean, participants, if you have more questions, you can put it out in the chat box. There's one more question regarding I mean, how exactly did co-curriculars help in your Goldman Sachs journey, and what are your suggestions, and what are the things which they should take in Christ University?
Again, co-curriculars means almost nothing on paper if it doesn't help you develop skills, right? Festing helped me with my formal communication skills. Street play helped me with my informal communication skills. It literally just taught me how to yell, and that was the best thing anyone could have given me, right? I was a class rep for a while. That taught me how to not be class rep again, and and so yeah, so each co-curricular that you take will teach you a new skill, right? And you'll learn it without even knowing that you're learning it, right? And so just do that co-curricular. At the very minimum, you're gonna have a very, very good time, right? You're gonna make some new friends, have a very good time, and you'll only realize the skills that it taught you after it has taught you those skills, right? So for me, I did these things. These were extremely helpful. My friends who did the artwork for Carnival, more than artwork, I think what it taught was organizational skills, where I could never do that, right? Like if they had to get, like, how hectic it gets, right? And if you have to finish this by this time, you need to finish that by that time, right? So you don't even understand that you're learning those things, but you have already learned it by the end of the day. So um, co-curricular is very helpful, uh, uh, more so off paper than on paper. Obviously, they add to your resume, but more importantly, they're going to help you with skills you never even knew you needed or you have learned. Right?
So it's all about the soft skills which we derive from it, the lessons we derive from those co-curricular activities that help us in the corporate world. Yeah, thanks for that. So there's this additional question which we did discuss about the internship, how it actually translated to PPO. So what Jeff George is asking is about, I mean, did that internship give you an edge to get the PPO? And could you also mention how the internship panned out? And if we don't get the internship, how do we go about getting into Goldman Sachs?
Oh, Jeff, good question, bud. I think for sure getting a PPO, again, the internship was less of an internship and more of the way I look at it now, it's more of a selection process, right? So it for sure is very valuable experience because it taught you so many more things and I could hit the ground running. But again, it's a very elaborate selection process, right? And so did it help me in getting the PPO? I'm not really sure how to answer that. For sure, it made it easier for me to get the PPO because right after, I think the Monday after my end sems happened, right? So I didn't even graduate college. I had started working, right? I hadn't even received my graduation and everything. I just finished my NSEMs and then the next Monday I was working already, right? And so in that case, it maybe sped it up, right? But I have plenty of friends who joined JP, Morgan Stanley, BCG, Goldman, the Big Four, all the big names, right? Without having the PPO process. So to say that you won't get into these or it's hurting your chances, I'm not going to say that's correct, right? Because you have just as much a chance as someone who got the internship, right? The only thing that the internship will do is that if you finally end up getting the PPO through the internship, it's just going to help you start working faster. So that's the only difference.
So one more question on the internship again. So I don't think that this I should stop recording, Santosh. But I'll ask this question on how to land an internship other than college. FIC is from DPS, so I mean, you can take this question.
How to land an internship other than through college? I think I can talk about it from Goldman. I'm not sure how it works in the other form, right? But I think you can apply on their website, and then again, that's just it's the equivalent of cold calling, where you apply on their website and put your resume in, and then hope that they call you back. Apart from that, I think most of the internships in GS are to the campus itself, right? So all of them will be campus, but you can definitely also try to do it through the website. I know for a fact that referring for an intern isn't something that happens, right? It's not like after you graduate, you can be referred. But before you graduate and for the internship itself, the referral process doesn't exist almost, right? And so I think the main two ways would be through campus or their website.
Mhm. Okay, so it is through campus. That's the major site because it will be niched out to only Christ and they'll be coming to Christ. Or the second way is the website where we apply and it will be millions of applications along with us. So actually, there's this question in the Q&A. He asks on any experiences required. So did you have any experience before Goldman Sachs? And if yes, how did it help out in your interview and how did you go about that?
Oh, I did. I actually had a month at EY before I went into Goldman. Uh, Super helpful because I got a taste of the corporate world before I had even entered the corporate world, right? So it was extremely helpful, and EY is an absolutely brilliant place to work, right? As a matter of fact, EY crowd is much younger as compared to some other firms out there, right? And so I was able to relate more. The people were able to relate to me much more, and therefore I grew a lot in that 1 month. Is it required for an internship? Definitely not, right? Too many people in Goldman, almost all the people, almost maybe 75% of the people who do land an internship in BS do so without having any prior experience, right? So you don't need any work ex before the internship itself, right? It's not a prerequisite. It could be preferred, right? But again, it's not. It may give you an edge, but again, if you have some other volunteer experience or if you have some other co-curricular experience in Christ, would probably count just as much, right? So it's not a prerequisite, but it will help you out.
Amazing. So we don't see any other questions. So I would say thanks a lot, Gautam, for this time. For 40 minutes of your time, we had taken only 30 minutes from you, and you did give us 56 minutes. Sorry, my bad. And okay, we see another question. Another 4 minutes, please, Gautam. If you do have time, we can
Go
take
for
this
it. Go
question.
for it.
Great.
Not
Uh,
an issue at all. Go for it.
so Aditi asks, as a new graduate or someone fresh in the corporate world, the idea is that we can devote much more than 100% of our professional lives. Is this something that can make you lose touch with your personal life, and is it advisable?
It depends on what your goal is, right? For everyone, their goals are very different, right? Some of my friends, the goal is to reach the top of the corporate ladder, and the only way to do that is to dedicate yourself to that towards that goal, right? And they've already gone much further than their peers, right? Because of that dedication towards it, right? And you will see that paying off, right? If your goal is, for example, my goal isn't to climb up the corporate ladder as soon as possible, but to make myself uh, better in every way so that someday it'll be useful for something, right? Now, again, I don't know if that'll ever come in handy or if it'll ever bear fruit, right? But that's my general big picture goal, right? And for me, obviously, it didn't make sense to spend all my time doing my job, right? And therefore, I learned other things like I learned how to program, right? And at some point, luckily enough, it did translate into a +1 in my job where I got to use that. But it's not necessary that I will get to use that and it will boost my career, right? It did boost my career, and I'm very glad that I got that opportunity, but it's not necessary. So again, coming back to the question, if you want to dedicate yourself 150%, so you're fresh out of college, you have much more energy than people who've been there for like 10, 20, 25 years, right? So I'd say dedicate yourself 150% for sure, right? But where you put that 150 is up to you, right? If you want to put 100 at your work where you're doing everything absolutely perfectly, or even 110 at your work, do that. And the other 40 maybe in developing yourself, right? And stuff like that. So you can choose, I'd say put in all the energy you have, but choose where you want to put it wisely.
Great. So I think that's all from our side. There are no more questions, and thanks a lot to Mehul and Preksha too to take this time. And Tanmay did reach out to Gautam, and we are actually having a lot more series coming up. Just like Gautam, we'll have multiple seniors and alumni who will be coming up and sharing their experiences. So again, thanks Gautam, and thanks to Mathur sir too. He's here and is the one who actually is guiding us throughout. And we'll have multiple, I mean, as I told, many more sessions. It'll help us a lot, second years and also the first years who want to get into Goldman and many other companies. So thanks, Gautam.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was absolutely brilliant getting in touch with you guys. It's always fantastic to be back in Christ. And, thank you guys just so much for having me. Made my Sunday very special today. Thank you.
So any other closed remarks where any takeaways which we need to do, please let's end this meeting with some gyan, Gautam.
Oh, dude, I'm very bad at yarn. Okay, but really just if one life motto would be have fun with it. Sometimes you forget to just have fun, right? Just make sure in whatever you're doing, you're having fun, and that'll just help you put that 150% in, right? So just have fun with it, whatever it is you're doing, and it'll take you somewhere for sure.
Um, Great, thanks a lot, Gautam, again, and guys, keep following FIC DPS for more updates, and you will get updates on the next series and next shows. And Gautam, you can always keep in touch with Gautam through the LinkedIn profile, which we will be sharing across on Instagram and also on WhatsApp. So I'm sure that Gautam would be really happy to answer your questions through LinkedIn. So that's all from our side, Gautam. We'll end this meeting now.